I feel like this is psychological warfare. We've gone for the bait. We've bought into this idea. And it's like, yeah, Muslims suck these days. We're at the bottom. We're like this. We're like the scum on the ocean.
My
Long
boss at
story.
work once, she basically said like, she was doing everything I was doing. And then she's on top of that was like, oh, and I had to get the kids ready and I had to take them to school and I had to do this and I had to do all these stuff that are associated with a mother, no doubt. Yeah. And I was just like, in my head, I was like, why are you doing this to yourself? Like, I know your husband, he's on a really good wage. Like, why are you here?
Every pocket of Muslims has their angle on it, but the angle is all just like, yeah, things are bad. The only time where you feel like I've anyway come across more positivity is really from scholars actually. Let me get started then. Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
That's like the cool way of saying it, you know? It's like you show that you know like each haraka.
I was conscious that I rush it when I say it, and then I end up like not actually saying it properly when I review what I've said.
But that's just like I felt like that's a bit of your North African accent coming through.
It's like my regimes, bro.
Yeah,
I remember
exactly.
I was sat with Musa Adnan once, and he was giving me a little bit of a Quran lesson, and he was like, "Yeah, stop right there." And I was like, "What? I've hardly even started." And then I found out, like my whole life, I've been saying the Jim.
It was the A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim.
Yeah, that was
Rajim.
it. And I was like, so fat for a long time. But you know what? Something in your gut is like, oh no, how could he stop me? I'm meant to be Arab. But then it's really nice to learn, because then afterwards you're like, oh, now he's getting the reward and I'm getting closer to what's correct, and it's all good. You know, alhamdulillah.
I mean, it's one of the least big mistakes compared to, like, you know, some Egyptians, like some of them, I believe, yani, they read Quran without qaf, like they just say like either they can't, or they just like, maybe they're not that educated, yani, and they're never really introduced to it or whatever. Or some of them, they struggle to say jim, they say g, and you know, you know. Or you know what's interesting? There's a few people now, they're like Pakistani originally, and they speak Arabic. And it's like they know Arabic well, but the pronunciation is just like this, you know, nothing like an actual Arab. So that's interesting. I haven't really come across that much before, but now I know a few people like that. And it's, yeah, I wonder sometimes what I sound like. Like, do I sound closer to actually, you know, a native speaker, or do I sound like these guys? I think what, you know, makes my level obvious, it's not the pronunciation, it's not that stuff. It's just the lack of like vocab or whatever.
Maybe. I remember I was sat with a Tunisian friend of mine in Tunisia once. Bro, I thought I was all right. And just one day, like, I was just talking in a crowd of, you know, group of us, and then he randomly just starts laughing, and I was like, what's funny? And he's like, bro, your accent is so British. I was like, oh God.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had no idea. You just don't know that you've got the accent because, you know, I wouldn't know what a British or Tunisian Arabic would sound like with a British accent, you know?
Yeah.
It's really weird.
Yeah. I know I've got that in French. Like in French, I sound British.
Oh, really?
You know?
Okay.
And it's not like what, you know, you might imagine, like, je m'appelle, you know, blah, blah.
Je m'appelle.
Yeah, it's not like that, but it's still like, I know, I hear it sometimes and I can't escape it fully.
Yeah, subhanAllah.
So, you know, the topic was, I want to start by this, like, basically, sensationalism. What is sensationalism? Like blowing something up so it seems like a big deal and you make a big drama out of it. And, you know, like media, all kinds of media does this all the time, you know. Like I heard about this whole, what's it called? Monkeypox thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Monkeypox. And obviously everyone's like mind is fresh from the whole corona thing. So anytime you mention anything like virus or anything contagious, like obviously people's trauma gets triggered, right? And it's like, this is exactly what media does. They find these little things, may or may not be significant and thing, and the way they write about it just sensationalizes it, right? So,
Yeah.
and obviously our mind naturally fills in the gaps of things. So they might not say like, oh yeah, monkeypox is gonna spread to everyone, it's gonna kill 1 million people. They don't say those things because they can't think of factually that's just not correct. But they'll just say things with emotive language so that your mind fills in the gaps with the worst case thing, right? And this happens all the time with people, you could say du'at, or people in the Muslim sphere, when it comes to like what's the the situation of the ummah these days, right? You'll see it in so many different ways. And the example, like you were just saying, you said that before we started recording, right? Like the whole praying janazah for the Palestinian Christian lady.
Oh, right, yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, Muslims are praying, or actually, that to make it more sensationalist, you would say Muslims prey on kuffar, right? And it's like you take maybe one instance, and obviously sometimes it's not even fact checked. But you take one instance of something and you say Muslims are doing this.
Right.
But it might have been 50
yeah.
people, it might have been 10 people. Muslims are doing this now, But it's really bad, bro, because what I said, I think I said this, I said this in another Telegram channel, not our one, is like, I feel like this is psychological warfare. And we've gone for the bait. We've gone for the bait fully. Like, we've bought into this idea. And it's not fully untrue, of course, but it's like, yeah, Muslims suck these days. We're at the bottom. We're like this. We're like the scum on the ocean. All of that. Because of, I think a lot of it's from these kind of stories, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be that. It's hard to separate fact and fiction and demographics as well. And we had a bit of a debate on the Telegram. We're plugging the Telegram every second, aren't we? I'm having a blast on there, bro. We're up on, I was up late, having deep discussions with people. But anyway, yeah, but we also realized that same sort of echo chamber kind of thinking is like, oh, I see what I think, and I think what I see kind of thing. So like algorithms showing you your kind of opinion on things and showing you your side of the story and not necessarily seeing what else is out there. Also, there's subtleties in terms of what the organization, such as Twitter or Facebook or whatever, pushes to show you. And a lot of that, if anybody's been following like the whole Elon Musk buying Twitter stuff, a lot of stuff's come out of that showing you how what the agenda is actually behind the scenes. Like, have you seen, I don't know how accurate this was, but I saw a clip yesterday of like a leaked interview with a Twitter engineer who was talking about the internal atmosphere of Elon buying Twitter, and how he was basically saying like, oh, Twitter is like left, and that's what they push, and they've got an agenda, blah blah blah, and people were losing their minds over Elon buying it and all this stuff, and there is no free speech and all this stuff. And then it made me think like, yeah, actually, if you just step back and have a look at any sort of article that's trending or anything that's being pushed, absolutely got the left agenda all over that. And now the left agenda has basically taken over, really and truly, in terms of the primary sources of information that we get these days. That, yeah, you are going to see maybe things in a negative light, things that we as Muslims would consider as normal or as good objectively, might be framed in a negative way, and then it makes you have negative perceptions of Muslims all over the place.
Yeah.
I saw just to finally say, I saw like an article on a particular Muslim country, or it was a little video on a particular Muslim country, and I saw that video that was on Twitter, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I was actually quite impressed. And then I opened the quotes and the comments and stuff. I didn't find a single positive comment, a single positive one. And I realized it was the language that was being used during the video. It was the language of the framing and everything. So yeah, dark times.
Framing's important, man. Framing
Context
makes a big difference. It's almost like sometimes, man, it's like we're just we're puppets, and it's like you pull one string, like you frame something in one way, we all react exactly as you would expect.
Yeah.
And then they pull it the other way. It's like, yeah, let me go that. And it's like, damn.
And I think what's interesting is the subtlety isn't necessarily always so noticed. So you see a reporter on the TV. Now, you're going to be, and I mean, I'm sure you are, you're going to be quite cautious when you're watching a report on a Muslim issue, okay, by a non-Muslim reporter, or even by a Muslim reporter, right? But that's because it's a non-Muslim issue. Do you take that same amount of precaution for other issues that are out there? You probably don't so much. So when they're talking about, I don't know, the climate issue, or talking about this particular country and what's happening there, or Venezuela or whatever, you're just taking that at face value. It's not until the issue comes to start talking about your neck of the woods or your, what you relate to, that you start taking a bit of caution, which then means that you're biased towards yourself and you just take whatever's fed to you about everyone else. And that's
for the most part.
issue.
Although I have noticed, I've become quite, sensitive to this on the Ukraine issue. Yesterday, I watched a video about Ukraine by a left-leaning US media company, and it stank of biasness. It stank hard. Like, whoa, like so anti-Russia. And it's like, I remember doing this in my head. I was like, they used that word for like Russia, for example, and that evokes certain feelings and thoughts. And then they use that word about Ukraine. I was like, these lot, man. It's like, it's all engineered, really. Or sometimes it's not even engineered. Like, so let's say this video I was watching, somebody has written a script for it, right? That guy writing the script, maybe he didn't engineer it, but his mind has been engineered to use certain words for certain like types of people or whatever, and other words for others. But again, like puppets, people are being manipulated to think different things about different, whatever it is, Ukraine, Russia, this and that. Even since the beginning of this Ukraine thing, I've been taking note of how they describe what's happening, right? So it's like the war in Ukraine or the war on Ukraine. This makes a difference, right? And I think, if I remember correctly, most of the time they're actually saying the war in Ukraine.
Right.
But obviously, if they were more biased towards the West, they would say the war on Ukraine, isn't it?
Right.
So, it's impossible, though, to take that level of notice about everything. So you're going to get swayed for sure.
Yeah. I've spoken to journalists before, actually, in an interview capacity, where they've tried to get information and stuff, and it's so subtle because they won't necessarily, like, if it's like an on street thing, they won't necessarily speak to you like very, very open and like, oh, I'm here to interview you, etc. They'll just start being your friend first, and then they'll like slip like questions in here and there, and you're just not sure if this is going on record or not, and you get very easily lulled. I'm not saying all journalists are like that, but I'm saying that.
So the default is that it's on record, like they don't have to inform you.
Yeah, why would they? They've asked you a question, and you've answered it, and they can report that all they need to say is, "We asked so and so, and this is what they said." That's the truth, isn't it? So, it's just a bit. I don't know. Obviously, at the end of the day, they've got papers to sell and hits to get on their website. So there is that perspective. But inshallah, here, bro, what can I say? You've got to take your precautions, and you've got to be aware of that echo chamber, haven't you? But we going back a bit about like what you said about Muslims praying the janazah over the Christian lady. That's it is easy, and I definitely get swept up on the whole look at the state of the ummah, look at the state of a Muslim situation. Some of that is informed by real life encounters, and some of that is informed by what we see online. And I think there is something to say about us judging the entire ummah based on our own experiences. But I also think part of that is necessary as well. I think if you lull yourself into a condition that you think the ummah is great and the ummah is fine, then how motivated are you to change things and improve things and make dua for the condition of the ummah,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of us is going to go as far as feeling like everything's fine, right? But what I've noticed, across the years, is that the sentiment is absolutely negative. And there's so many different pockets of, you know, where people come from with this, right? So, for example, you might have I remember, you know, back in the day I was watching The Arrivals. The Arrivals puts you in that state of we completely out of control. Everything's in the hands of these few elite people in these secret organizations. And, you know, we're just sitting ducks waiting, hoping that, you know, they don't hypnotize us or whatever it is. We don't get poisoned by the water, right? So that's one pocket. I'm sure there's another pocket, for example, right, especially in America, where it's like, oh, look at the state of like Muslims and misogyny, you know, like, oh, Muslim men, they don't know how to treat women and this and that, right? They could really feel down about that, right? Then you've got, you know, the Daniel Hakikaju types where it's like liberalism is completely flooded like every corner of the ummah, and it's like it's fully like entrenched in the West, and don't worry, no, it's fully like in the Muslim world as well, and you know, this and that. So every little pocket, you know, no matter where you know, maybe the Sufi kind of leaning types, they'll be like, look, there's no spiritual sense of spirituality left anymore. Everything is, you know, about the material world. Nobody is like, you know, secluding themselves anymore. We're all this and that. So every pocket of Muslims has their angle on it, but the angle is all just like, yeah, things are bad. The only time where you feel like I've anyway like come across more positivity is really from scholars, actually, like where they might just point out here and there, like, you know, I mean, and there's hadith about this anyway, like the ummah will always be on khair as long as this and this, or like there will always be a group from my ummah who are striving against was it you? I think yuqatiluna fi sabil. Yeah, they're always fighting for the sake of Allah. So most of it, yeah, like I'm saying, like there's different angles and different like framing of it, but it's all like negative, and it's just like different ways or reasons of why like we're going down the drain.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of I think it was a fatwa from Sheikh Saleh Al-Fawzan. I'm pretty sure it was from him in relation to like sharing images of you know, injured Muslims, mutilated Muslims, Muslims in, you know, suffering, etc. And his advice was to not share that at all, because it disheartens the Muslims. It, you know, it upsets them. It discourages them. It puts fear in their hearts. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah. Since then, I've made it a very clear objective of mine not to reshare that sort of stuff. And actually, when you go further, you realize actually, you know, would I want my, you know, son or myself or my parents or whatever, pictures of them getting floating around the internet in that condition? You know, their reward is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, we have to, but at the same time, we have to be conscious and not rely on just those emotive things to feel something for the ummah. And we're all victim of that, where we all, you know, we don't start making dua and crying and stuff until we see something horrible, you know.
Yeah.
But if we were more in touch on a consistent scale, I think it wouldn't be so much of an issue.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going on the Muslim Skeptic website, right, which is Daniel Hakikaju's website, because I feel like Daniel Hakikaju is a good example of sensationalism and really negativity. And I'm not saying that as like, you know, maybe what people might want to hear is that some people, that I'm saying he's bad or like what he does is bad. I'm just saying this is like a typical example, and there are many other examples where people like mostly are negative. To be fair though, when I go on the homepage, there's a certain percentage of more positive sounding things. But for example, right, this dude, maybe you've come across him on YouTube, Sadguru. This what is he? He's a Hindu yogi, right? He's been on I think he's been on Joe Rogan. He gets invited to all these different podcasts, and I think he's got like his own YouTube channel.
Oh, I know this guy.
Yeah. So what's this article about him called, right? Sadguru, popular Hindu yogi, welcomed as honored guest in Saudi Arabia. Okay. So and obviously all of, you know, we have to understand, like most media, like articles or even YouTube videos, most of the consumption of these things is only of the title. right?
Yeah, yeah,
Most
definitely.
people, like out of the people that see the title, 5%, 10% actually read it or watch the video, right? So we have to remember that just the title alone is sending messages. So if you were to just read that title, Popular Hindu Yogi Welcomed as Honored Guest in Saudi Arabia, as somebody who's already been conditioned to think of negative things and all of that, and like we're in a bad situation, hello, what would go through your head? You know, you start thinking, yeah, you know, Saudi's going down the drain. Like even Saudi, you know, where the Haramain is, and you know that's like the most religious place, and everyone's religious there. But now, you know, they're welcoming this and that, and that's like where it goes, right? But now, what's the reality? So we have like a title and we have a reality. The reality is that a few people honored, like have this guy. I mean, honored guest is a very, you know, emotive like language, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, of
But
course.
a few certain people, I don't know, invited this guy or, you know, invited him over. But what about the average like people in Saudi? Like, what are they like? Right? They probably never heard of this guy and they didn't even hear he's coming to their country, right? And when he leaves, they still won't have heard of him, right?
Yeah.
But if they did know, I'm sure like more than half of them would be up in arms. It's not to say there isn't a 10, 15, whatever percent of Saudis who are quite welcoming and open to like liberal ideas and this and that. But I'm just saying, like, don't take one negative thing that maybe 5, 10% of the ummah is affected by and then just assume that it's 90% of the ummah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of that Mufti Menk fiasco that happened recently with him sitting next to. I don't know if we spoke about it on the episode or not, or if we spoke about it off air. It was one or two. But similarly, you know, I'm sure everyone's aware of it, but similarly, just the way it was reported, the way it was kind of flourish, and then actually break things down and realize it's not how it may seem initially. Yeah, and I think, you know what, I'm going to say this on record, and it is what it is, and whatever the chips fall where they may. I think that a lot of Muslims give Saudi a very hard time all the time, you know, and I'm not saying, you know, countries are necessarily free from criticism, but I do think it's like, there's no fact checking. Basically, there's no fact checking with Muslim countries. There's no fact checking with ourselves. Unfortunately, we read one bad thing about Muslim countries or Muslim individuals, and we just boom. We don't check who it's from. You know, I've got a book actually called. I kind of want to go over there and grab it, but it's The Obligation of Verifying News. I can't remember what sheikh it is. The Obligation of Verifying News Islam. It is Sheikh Saleh Al-Fawzan again, you know. Funnily enough, it's a small book, and I remember reading it, and it was quite eye-opening because actually you read the ayat in the Quran about you know, the obligation of verifying the news essentially, but you kind of like think, oh yeah, so it's you know, oh, Al Jazeera reported it, oh, Russia Today, oh, BBC reported it, it's fine, that's it, it's good. You know, when I know firsthand, I've been witness to things that are, oh, it's like £3, bro, the book. I've been witness to things that have been completely misrepresented and misreported. So what makes me think that everything else is being represented clearly and accurately, you know? And with all due respect, our Muslim brothers and sisters, whether they are laymen or leaders, require husn al-dhan maybe more than non-Muslim or whatever. All right, that's how we should be, at least. But obviously, to an adequate and a appropriate level.
Realistic level, yeah.
Yeah, to a realistic and appropriate level. So, yeah, and I think we don't know where the line stops, do we? When it comes to criticizing, because yeah, there are some people that's with all, you know, it's obvious, bro. They will spend every waking minute just criticizing leaders and rulership and everything, right? And that's just what they're known for. That is the flag they'll be known for one day. And then it's like, okay, let's start with them. Okay, what about, okay, then you've got the government institution, so the actual government, let's criticize all of them. Okay, and then you've got like the people that work for the government, let's criticize all of them. And then you've got, oh, what about the businesses that provide services for the government, for the people that work for the government? You know, that so and so rented out his hallway to this, he must support them. Oh, then we got everyone who's actually supported them or voted for them. Like, where do you stop? You know, where do you stop? So you could literally just strike off an entire, like half of an entire nation just by you know, death by association sort of thing. So you've got to be conscious of that. You've got to be really conscious. And then, sorry, the final one is like, you could then criticize people who don't criticize. Okay, so you could end up asking a layman, just like some extremists do, where they say, "What's your opinion on so and so?" You know, "What's your opinion on so and so ruler?" I don't really have an opinion. How could you? Look what he does. He does this and this and this. Right, you're just as bad. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
So yeah, where does it stop? Subhanallah, where does it stop?
Yeah. So yeah, man. Like, I just actually was going through the articles. What's the reality, though? This is the problem, yeah? It's like, let's say you see 10 articles about, let's say, Saudi Arabia embracing liberalism, yeah?
Right.
It's not hard to find 10 articles or whatever about that, or 10 examples of it. Because it's, like, as we've said before, like, media in general, right? Not even social media, but I guess because social media has the algorithm aspect, it magnifies in a, how do you say it? Self-reinforcing way, right? So if something gets initial views or whatever, then it's going to get pushed further, and then that means it will get pushed further, etc. Right? That doesn't happen so much with like printed like media or whatever. So the negative gets pushed because negative actually, for whatever maybe a deep psychological reason, it gets more attention than good stuff. Also, a lot of the good stuff is just like secret because there's no outcry, right? It's like, you know, man helps old lady cross the road. That's not being turned into a blog post, is it? You know?
Yeah.
So like the negative stuff is gonna like get out there and get pushed out there, and we have examples of that easily. We can find negative examples. The positive, like we don't have those examples because it's not in media, even though it might be the overwhelming majority. So it's like we're stuck, bro. It's like, how do we judge what reality is? Is it?
Yeah. I think you've got that powerful hadith, and part of it is Allahumma arini al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'ah. So may Allah, ya Allah, show me the truth as truth and guide me to following it. You know, I think that's the accurate translation. That's the one thing. The other thing is that you have husn al-dhan for your Muslim neighbors and Muslims around you. And that's so much so to the extent, like, you'll see some fatwa of people that will say, oh, I have a suspicion that my partner is cheating on me, or I have a suspicion that, and then the sheikh will say, have you got witnesses? And be like, oh no, I don't. Well, then you've got no standing in Sharia, because cohesion is way more important than, you know. And actually you've got clear ayat in the Quran about suspicion, you know, and how we should abstain from suspicion when much of suspicion is sin. Okay, so you've got those elements. You've also got the logical reality that you will never be able to objectively judge an entire population. That isn't your job. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's job, so to speak. Because you can't look at a whole demographic unless you're going to do a whole study yourself and get accurate data and stuff. Maybe it could allude you to the condition of the people, but to just briefly glance at a population and say, you know, objectively, this is the issue, this is the state we're in, that can be quite difficult because you don't know individual situations.
It's probably impossible, Yanni, isn't it? Like, like to do a proper study where, you know, you get like statistically significant data. You probably need like sample size of 10,000 maybe. It depends how big of a sweeping statement you want to make from the conclusions. But, you know, let's say we want to talk about the perspective or the thinking of Muslims in the West, right? Yeah. Let's say there are 10 million Muslims in the West, 10 or 20 million. Even a sample size of 10,000 sounds small actually compared to that, right? Yeah, but just to get started, Yani, you would need, you know, well-designed questions, of course, and you would need like minimum 10,000, and that very rarely gets done, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And then you've also got like the people themselves and the outliers and the methodological weaknesses of those studies.
Yeah,
like we shared some in the group the other day when we were kind of talking about this issue. I shared quite a few from Pew Research in relation to Muslim religiosity around the world, And like one of them was like, oh, because I was coming at it from an angle, a negative angle, that I felt like in some places, most Muslims didn't pray 5 times a day, some places. I still feel that a lot just by my demographic. I can't say for sure, but I'm just saying by what I see. And then the stats were a bit hit or miss. Like some countries, there were definitely, it definitely showed by their research that it was like half or less or whatever. Many countries, it was a lot more. It was a lot more. But then you could then look at that data and say, well, if someone came to me and asked me if I prayed 5 times a day, what am I likely to say? Out of shame and out of guilt, probably going to say, yeah, sure I do. Of course I do. You know? But then some people might get that question and be like, no, I don't. No, I really need to. You know? And actually, I watched a YouTube video, subhanAllah. I watched a YouTube video. I don't know who did it. It was like some non-Muslim channel or whatever. And they were like, let's do all Muslims think alike, right? And they had like a spectrum of Muslims, boys and girls, men and women, maybe 6 of them on there. And it was hard to tell by just looking at them how religious they were. Like some of the brothers were like massive beards, but like you was just like, is that a Sunnah beard or is that like a indie beard? Like I don't know what the beard is there.
Yeah.
And then I thought, okay, let me take it. Let me just assume it's a Sunnah beard. These guys are Sunnah beards. They're not dressed in thobes, but they're Sunnah beards. And then the first question was like, how many of you pray 5 times a day? And the ones that do pray go sit all the way on the right side. The ones that pray less all the way on the left. Bro, like none of the guys were on the far right. So none of the guys could say they pray 5 times a day. 2 of the sisters, I think, were. But one of them like had a turban hijab, so you might assume if you didn't know. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So actually the sisters were outdoing the brothers. Like the guy with the big beard was like in the middle. Like, yeah, I pray like 2 out of 3, 2 out of 5, subhanAllah. And I was just like, see, this is messing me up. And I just stopped watching the video there and then because I was like, nah, I don't want to watch this. So yeah, you can never really assume. You can't judge a book by its cover. You know, one might objectively look at those people and say, oh, the guy with the big beard, he must pray 5 times a day. The girl with the turban hijab, oh, maybe not. You know, that's like your assumption, isn't it? And it's not a good assumption, but it's an assumption many will make.
Yeah.
In reality, that isn't the case. And actually, just to finally say, that sister, it was the one who ended up advising everyone else the strongest about Salat, right? So it's just like, hey, maybe you need to hold your horses a little bit.
Yeah. So what we could take from this, like, you know, whether it's from like the studies you talked about or the just, you know, your own observations, we can conclude, I don't know how bad or good things are, but I know we definitely need to do better. Yeah. And then you just work on doing better, I suppose, without really knowing how bad or not bad it is, right? Pretty much, you know. And it's like, we always have to keep in mind, and this is where the real positivity comes from, is like Allah is able to change anything very quickly, you know. And Allah gave izzah and strength and spread Islam so quickly, really so quickly. And a lot of the time, you know, certain movements of reviving Islam in whatever areas of the world, it was a few decades worth of work. And often the person that kicked it off didn't live to see the end of it. So we don't really work for the results and look for those results. Of course, you're looking for certain positive feedback to see, does it seem like I'm on the right track kind of thing? But you know, if you're looking to see the result in something significant in a few months or years, then it's the wrong kind of approach. I think, you know, a lot of the time it's like one sheikh, it's his student or his student's student who gets to see the end result of like the revival of a whole region and stuff like that, you know. So I think we kind of like, we're not naive and we're like, yeah, everything's cool. Like we know like liberalism is kind of the main ideology, like being pushed on everyone. And we know these things, but it's like when when this Pew Research, they interviewed people in whatever, let's say in Turkey, you know, were they going to the cities? Were they going to the rural areas? Were they like in the south? And if they're only asking a few thousand or whatever, it's very easy to have skewed results. So we can't really go by that stuff. It's more just like, look, the Muslims are on good. And the Muslims, in most parts of the world, even outside of Muslims, people like still on the fitrah. You know, again, I'm coming, like, what's my data to prove that, right? But,
Yeah, yeah.
but,
That's the thing.
but I think you do observe that when you go to certain areas. If you just look at some of these IERA videos, they go to like a village in Philippines, and they're like, yeah, this Trinity thing is weird. Oh yeah, and they just like all accept Islam or whatever. So yeah, if you look at those kind of anecdotal things, you do tend to find a lot of people really that are kind of on the fitrah. And it's only the people who have had the fitrah squeezed out of them like for decades, right? In places like America or whatever. It's only those really who are like so resistant to these kind of basic fitri things sometimes, you know?
Yeah, and there's levels to which you can take that. I mean, there's some people that would talk about the aqidah of individuals. There's some people that would talk about the proponency of innovation of some individuals.
That drives me nuts, bro.
Well, there's things though that you grow up in a Muslim country and you'll not realize that are like really really bad things to do. Like I remember growing up in Tunisia, and like where I lived, at least there was like a festival that would happen every year, which is actually like you visit this guy's grave and like everybody does it, and it's like this big festival and blah blah. And I grew up like I remember going to that festival not knowing anything about it, you know. And then when the revolution happened and a bit more, I don't know, there was a bit more Islamic freedoms in the way that people could speak about the deen. That stopped because people found out through loads of people giving dawah there that this is wrong and it shouldn't happen. Maybe there was some fear as well. Maybe there was some extremists that actually stopped it from happening. I don't know the story. I just know it stopped happening. But yeah, stuff like that. And it's like, oh, that's completely normal. That was completely normal for that locale. But if you were to take that somewhere else, or that activity somewhere else, you'd be like, oh, no, this is completely wrong. This shouldn't be done, you know?
No, those things do exist.
Of course, yeah.
Of course. Yeah, I'm not saying that. But can't remember what the original point was.
You said that stuff really annoys you.
Oh, yeah. So, okay. I saw one guy, he was saying like, he was talking about trying to find a wife and stuff, right? He's like, I can't find anyone who, number one, is not a feminist, and number two, has the right aqidah. Yeah?
Right.
And I'm just imagining, Yani, and then based on the further stuff he was saying, it was obvious that his version of having the right aqidah is that he's going to be able to ask her certain of these very technical, specific questions, and she's going to give the right answer, right? According to, what he believes to be correct, right? And it's like, no, that's not having the right aqidah. That's having the right aqidah and having studied it and learnt it enough to give those kind of answers, right?
Right, I understand.
So, for example, like the concept of 3 types of tawheed, yeah? Like, you could have the right aqidah without knowing about those 3 types of tawheed. But it sounds like this guy is, if, for example, she can't name those 3 types of tawheed, she can't have the right aqidah. She's not going to have the right aqidah. You know what I mean? That's what I mean by it drives me mad. Like, the definition of the correct aqidah is completely wrong. And it's completely like too, I would say, high of a standard, yani. Unless specifically you want a wife who is actually studied that and she's educated.
Well, yeah,
in that.
this is it. If you were to say, I want a wife that's studied to a particular level.
Yeah, that's different, isn't it, to the correct aqidah, right? And it's like, then you get these crazy statements like, oh yeah, like most of, I don't know, most of Turkey are Ash'ari.
Well,
it's like they haven't studied aqidah to know that.
I don't want to turn this into a topic about like, I don't want to call it super Salafism. I don't like that word, but I don't know what other word to describe it. I don't like the word, so don't quote me on that. But I had a bit of a breaking point at one point with this, where basically the contentious argument that basically halted my pursuit in this field was that somebody was adamant to me that the default of a Muslim is bad. The default of a Muslim is that they're misguided, okay? And you have to then objectively prove that they are guided or prove that they're upon the haqq. And that is what became a big roadblock for me to actually live life as a Muslim in where I live, right? It became, so I sank into this really bad place in my mind and my heart where I felt like I just couldn't sit or trust or talk to any Muslim around me because of this worm that had made its way in my brain, right? So like donating to Masajid became something I had to question myself on, right? Like the local masjid would ask for donations, and I would hesitate because I'd be like, oh, but I saw that they had this book that was refuted in their library, and actually I don't know what this, and they like, and this particular group come here sometimes and do dawah and stuff, and I don't know about that. So what am I? So if I put what am I funding? I don't know. Like, that constant questioning of the ummah around me halted any good I could ever do, and it also halted any learning that I could do as well, because the spaces of where these supposed pure people who could teach me everything weren't in my locale, right? So I had no access to them. So I had no access to the right people to learn from. And when I say right, I mean right. Allah knows best. Right people to learn from. And then those all around me, well, you have to assume they're all misguided unless they can prove their point and prove what their aqidah is or whatever. Now, and that halted me so badly, bro, that I realized I couldn't live like that. And then I'd like to think that I'm now in the middle a bit, right? I'd like to think I'm in the middle, where I'll assume someone's good unless I see something bad. Not I'll assume someone's bad until I see something good, right? So that should be the default, really. I'd like to think. If someone says assalamu alaikum to me, wa alaikum assalam, you're my Muslim brother. You know, it's like recently I met someone who was from a completely different sect of Islam. Even if you want to say they're Muslim, I don't know. Someone could question if they're even Muslim based on their beliefs, right? But they said assalamu alaikum to me. I was like, wa alaikum assalam. We got talking. I was talking to him as if he was Muslim. It wasn't until they started sharing some of the stuff and rituals and stuff they did, I was like, okay. I'll backtrack now on my position. But you can't have that suspicion all the time, 24/7.
I mean,
you know?
Did he ever share any proof of that?
I can't
being
remember.
The default.
I argued a little bit, but at that time I didn't have enough knowledge to argue against it. Bro, can I say something? Yeah, I've never told you this before. This is a Mind Heist exclusive. When I went to start Mind Heist, bro, right? I shared who I was doing Mind Heist with, which was you. And somebody said to me, "Bro, have you checked his aqidah?" And I was like, "What do you mean? What's the issue? I've known him for years." He's like, "Yeah, bro, I've seen him with this guy. I've seen him with that guy." And I was just like, okay, this is getting silly now. It's getting too much, you know. And obviously, you know, no, it's not a secret. Like some of the shuyukh that we take from, or some of the shuyukh that you take from, have also had their critics. So their same critics of those shuyukh will then criticize those who listen to him. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Yeah. So that's what it is. It wasn't necessarily anything about you specifically, but it was about, oh, he listens to so and so sheikh, so you need to be careful.
Yeah. So I heard about that before.
Yeah. So
apparently,
this is it, man.
I never found out what exactly the details of this was, but I remember I recorded a kind of a TV show,
right?
And Musa Adnan was on it as well, and there was like 6 of us. It was like a panel kind of discussion kind of thing, and we filmed it. We spent a whole day like filming non-stop. We filmed like, I don't know, 10 episodes like back to back kind of thing, and then we uploaded it like whatever a few months later. And then one of the people said, "Oh no, I don't want it uploaded anymore because I found out one of the guys on it is deviant or whatever."
Right. Yeah.
I can't remember. Maybe he said it was me who was the deviant. I can't remember. But anyway, and I was just like, "Oh, what the hell?" Like, at least do your homework first after we recorded it all.
I will never forget when I first started on Twitter years ago. You know, I started practicing. I've started, you know, getting a lot of people engaging with me and stuff. And I met one of the brothers for the first time through Twitter. I met him in London, and this was like the first time I'd ever hung out with Muslims in London and stuff. He took me to a masjid, and then like whilst I was in the masjid, he comes up to me, and goes, "Bro, that guy over there, just be careful because he refuted you on Twitter." And I was like, what does that even mean? I didn't even know what the word refuted meant at the time, especially in that context. Well, like this was so, like I was so new. I was like, what do you mean? Like, what did I do? And he's like, I'll tell you later. And then the brother came and like said salam to me, but like there was like a bit of, I don't know, there was a bit of a weird vibe, especially considering what the other brother just said to me. And then afterwards I was like, what did I do? Like, can you tell me? And he's like, well, apparently you retweeted this thing of a sheikh that is, bro, whoever this sheikh I retweeted, I can't remember his name, but I remember him being, and still is, very, very well known, and he's like very popular, and I don't really know if there's any issues with it. I don't think there is, but yeah, very, very well known. And he was like, yeah, you retweeted this sheikh, so yeah, that's why he refuted you. I was like, what does that even mean? Like, I don't even know what that means. I didn't know.
Yeah.
So so it just shows you like I got refuted for something out of innocence and out of complete. And even so, like, talk to me. Why didn't the brother say anything to me? What does that mean? Do you
If you
care for
think
your
about
brothers?
it, bro, I was just thinking, probably, I don't know, but probably a lot of people are introduced to the concept of like the correct aqidah and incorrect aqidah through this stuff. It's not through learning, properly trying to improve myself. It's literally through one person criticizing the other. Like that's literally a main way that people are being exposed to this. That's not a positive thing, man.
I, I think there's a balance to strike, and I'd like to think at this age, I've gone through. I got close to that extreme, and then I was like, okay, this isn't the ease of the deen that I was told that Islam is.
Yeah.
And then I found a comfortable balance. I'd like to think where I have husn al-dhan up until a certain point instead of no husn al-dhan at all.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that my husn al-dhan isn't blind. It isn't blinding either, and I'd like to think I'm quite balanced. And there's a lot of shuyukh, bro, that I know have problems, and I'll say this on record. I know their problems. I know they have problems. I know what particular issues they have problems in, and I don't take from them on that particular issue, but I'll benefit from them on very other things. There's one, for example, he did very good Ramadan series. I listened to the Ramadan series. There's a specific thing that he talks about in modern day discourse. So not historical discourse, but like how to deal with this particular modern day issue that I'd absolutely disagree with him on, and I don't want to go down that road. But when he's talking about history, he's talking about the seerah, he's talking about this or that, I benefit from that.
Yeah.
But I think you've got to be at a particular level and comfort and security in your own belief of Islam, so to speak, and aqidah to do that. And I appreciate the concern maybe some brothers have for a layman getting into taking everything from someone, like. But at the end of the day, like we both listen to Mufti Munir, for example, and we know he's got critics. He's got very harsh critics for things that don't really, but maybe more personal stuff than it is actual legitimate beefy stuff that you can sink your teeth into.
Yeah.
So nobody's free critics, bro.
Exactly. Like, I think I was going to say I went from a place of, I was, alhamdulillah, never in that place, but basically the threshold for considering someone deviant is just much higher for me than these kind of people that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, rather than, you might say he's deviant and you won't even learn like fiqh of salah from him, but I would just say he's a Muslim. He is knowledgeable, no doubt, because he studied all these years, right? And he can recite this and this and this to you, right? So he's knowledgeable. You can't say he's not knowledgeable, but he has mistakes, like many people have mistakes. But it's like, these guys it's like, if they make a mistake, they're deviant. You know what I mean? So just narrows it way too much. And again, someone who, maybe out of all the shuyukh that I've quote unquote studied with, there's one that I have maybe a more personal relationship with, because I've just sat in a more intimate setting with him, right?
Right.
And he is looked up to, like these people look up to him, okay? And this sheikh is so nuanced and so like, he's not on that thing like, oh, one mistake, deviant. But people that follow him are like that. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So
I'm definitely this is quite an interesting topic, and it'd be interesting to get experts on it if there is such a thing. But it can be really daunting for some Muslims, this area, and it can. I've seen Muslims, bro, that have gone into the harsh side of it and come out the other end not even Muslim anymore. I've seen people that come into the harsh side of it and come out of it not even practicing anymore. And I've seen people that have gone into the harsh side of it and stayed upon that harsh side forever. And then there's some that have kind of come back as well.
Yeah.
So there's a spectrum of outcomes. The most that I do see are those that go into it and then they're not really practicing as actively afterwards. That's what I do see. So like that part of why I said like I started finding the deen really difficult because of that, I reversed a bit. These people just thought, well, actually, Let me just I don't know, that music, let me listen in, that beard, let me trim it, and that, do you understand, whatever. So that's kind of what ended up happening there. But what I was going to say is, I do find myself taking the advice of the scholars in relation to, like, the scholars are somebody that other scholars would recognize. Okay, so like there might be a batch of people that I listen to anyway, I've never really had any issues with, and if I see them recommend someone, that's how I then start listening to that person. Like, for example, I can't remember how I found Mufti, for example. But I found Mufti on a particular platform where he was associated with other shuyukh and ulama that I listened to, right? So then I started listening to Mufti, and then Mufti became an avenue to loads of other people, like brother Khalid Green, Tahir Wyatt, these kind of people. There was another brother as well. I'm not going to name everybody because then that would just get me in hot water for no reason. but that's it. And and actually now we brought Sharif on, didn't we? And Sharif, actually Khalid Green, lives in that homestead, so to speak, that area that Sharif is. So like it just showed like, oh, I clearly have this kind of link going on where I've established these links in my mind, at least of what I've seen online.
Yeah.
And I've now got a bit of a network, I suppose, going of people that I take from. And when I have a question, also, I won't just ask one of them. I might ask all of them. I remember I had a question once. I emailed Khalid Green, I emailed Mufti, I got a spectrum of answers which weren't too dissimilar. There were small variations in the confidence of their answer. Like one of them said, "Oh, I don't want to answer it at all. Like that's a bit too much for me," which I respected. I was like, "Yeah, fair play," But yeah, that gives me comfort as well. Is that you haven't got this one track mindset for a particular issue, which you could easily have in a very monolithic kind of group, I suppose, with no variety in thinking or studying or whatever.
Yeah. And there is a very big difference. I think this makes a huge difference. You said how you find like a network of shuyukh that kind of recommend each other, or you see them, sitting together, etc. And therefore you trust them by mutual association, this and that.
Right.
That's good, right?
Yeah.
It's reassuring, etc. And it also allows you to like not keep questioning basics, right? If they're all on the same foundation, then you can take that foundation as the truth and move forward. The problem comes where someone has that, and then anyone outside of that network is wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's where because there's a very big difference between saying I trust these lot and I follow these lot. I don't know about the others. I didn't look into the others too much, so I can't comment on them. But what other people, what some people say is, these are the scholars, these are the only scholars, these are my guys. Anyone else is not on the truth, kind of thing, isn't it? There's a big difference there, But yeah, so you can see how you said the guy, the default is someone is not guided, right?
Yeah.
You can, just to go back to the topic, like you can see how that would produce this level of sensational, negative, headlines, if you like, right? If your worldview is literally the default is negative, then what's going to come out on their tweets? What's going to come out in their, YouTube video titles and stuff?
Well, this is it, and that I think that shaped my understanding for a long time, up until even when we did that episode a couple episodes ago about Tunisia, and how I said that I'd come back with more of a positive lens as opposed to an immediate negative one. It is very easy for me to go to Tunisia, which, studies suggest is a very liberal Islamic country, right? Pew Research, one of their studies was like the Tunisia compared to other countries was like one of the lowest, if not the lowest, for those who want Sharia as the dominant sort of law legislation. Yeah. I think it was around the 50% mark compared to like, I think it was Afghanistan was like 99% or something like that. Obviously, we already spoke about the issues with methodology and the issues possibly with data collection like that.
Yeah.
But it's very easy for me to go into that country of mine and say, oh, well, look, the adhan's going off. I don't see anybody moving. Right? Yeah. Stuff
because
like that,
just
right?
Confirms. That's like confirmation bias.
Yeah.
Basically. Yeah.
But though I do remember, but then you see things, bro. And there's this brother, may Allah have mercy on him. May Allah have mercy on him because he passed away. And he was a good friend of mine in Tunisia, and I loved him dearly. He passed away a few years ago in a motorcycle accident. And all my life, bro, I would have never guessed that he had any knowledge of the deen or whatever. And he was a barber, bro. He used to cut hair. And I remember being in the barber shop, bro, and he was cutting my hair. And he said, "Oh, do you want to trim the beard?" Blah blah blah. And I was like, "No, I'm okay." And then he goes to me, "You know what? When I trim people's beards, for every hair, I bet you I get a sin." You know, like he knew that the beard was something that was like fard upon Muslims. But like your assumption is that, oh, all these people are ignorant, they don't know anything about the beard. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? But he was a guy trying to make ends meet, and he was conscious of that, right? And I was like, oh my god, like I wouldn't have never known that you knew that, if you know what I mean, like because I clearly judged you based on your appearance and your day job and what you do, you know, and I felt really guilty in myself. I still feel guilty now. Obviously, he's passed away, and may Allah have mercy on him. So it just shows you, subhanAllah, that there's people with all sorts of issues. And do you know what? Like, I'm sure, you know, you've been in times of crisis. I've been in times of crisis. There's Muslims around the world that are in so much hardship that, unfortunately, and I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but unfortunately, some of their main obligations or stuff, they fall short in. Because actually, what they're trying to think of is like putting food on the table. Now, they need to obviously develop, and we all need to develop our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as He is the provider and the sustainer and He who gives us the rizq in the first place. But some people maybe have a bit of a short... we all do. We have shortcomings where when we're in a time of crisis, we're not thinking about how to do it according to Islam. We're just thinking about how to do it. You know, we're not thinking about how Allah can give me rizq if I obey Him. We're just thinking of how am I going to get rizq? Oh, I need to do this. I need to go to work. I need to do that. Oh, the adhan's going. Yeah, but I need to work. Like, there might be a lack of education there, but it's not malicious. Yeah. It's not like a malicious disregard for the deen. It might be out of ignorance, or they weren't educated and they're doing the best they can with what they know. You know, and I think that's a key difference there.
You know? I think for me, if I hear about those situations, I need to really just thank Allah that I was put in the situation, that I was exposed to whatever knowledge I was, you know, exposed to, because that made all the difference for me.
And that informs your da'wah, bro, as well. Because we had this the discussion, didn't we, on the Telegram, me, you, and the other brothers, where it was, I put an argument like, if you don't know how bad the ummah is, then how do you give da'wah to them about the issues that they've got? And the other brother was like, well, you've got to be positive and have husn al-dhan, and that can also inform your da'wah. And I think it's right there, because if I go into a community and I start giving da'wah with the assumption that they're all, you know, they're all misguided, or they're all like, they all got these problems, right? Then there's going to be a tone to my da'wah that's going to be not very inviting. It's
maybe arrogant even,
maybe arrogant, or like, how could you not? And that always reminds me, and it will always remind me, and I hate myself for it, of what I mentioned before in previous episodes, of like when I first started practicing, how I spoke to my mom and dad, you know, and like I thought my dad didn't know anything, bro, and I spoke to him as if he didn't, right? And now that he's passed away, bro, I'll go through his books and I'll go through his old stuff that he never shared with anyone. He's got like I think my sisters are like putting this out into a book format, but he had like a book of like this thick, full of poetry that he wrote way before any of us were born. And he's got like huge poems, intricate poems about the Quran in there, about Islam in there, about the deen in there. And it's like, bro, he knew all this stuff before I was even born. So who am I to say? Before I was even a thought,
That's
he knew
embarrassing.
about it. It's true though. It's true. And then it made me think like, yo, it wasn't my dad who had that issue. It was the circumstances he was in and how he dealt with those circumstances. But the end was all up there. Because why is it that he started practicing at the end with very little help? You know, with very little help, because it was all up here. He just had some demons he was battling. And some issues that he was trying to deal with. You know, but it doesn't mean he was ignorant, and it doesn't mean he didn't know anything. So and I take that now as an example, and I try to apply that to everybody. You know, and like when I went back to Tunisia, loads of the people, loads of his friends, loads of his peers were coming up to me and giving me condolences and stuff. And bro, the stuff they were coming out with, they were reciting ayats from the Quran and ahadith like this. You know, and all my life I just thought they didn't know anything and they were ignorant people, and I don't like my dad's friends. And so just shows you.
I found that as well, to be honest. When you mix with people, I guess it's more with Arabs because they have more access to the Quran or understanding the Quran or whatever, or the Hadith. But it's like, because often they just know stuff by people sharing it around, people saying it, hearing it as they're growing up. But also, like, don't forget, their normal schools teach them certain, you know, whether it's basic fiqh or they do tafsir and stuff like throughout their school time, right? So a lot of like what you might be learning age 20, they learn at like age 12, you know,
And it
even though
informs
they
their
don't
culture,
fit the
doesn't it?
bill. They don't fit the bill of that, you know, guy with the this or that. Yeah, so.
But that's their culture. Like, I know a lot about World War II and Queen Victoria and, you know, the Tudors and all
Yeah.
of this stuff because I grew up in a culture that was what was educated to us. Even I'm not interested and I haven't embarked on that.
Exactly.
The culture around me
Yes.
has taught me that.
Exactly.
Likewise, the Muslim
Yeah.
countries, that's what's informed them. My cousins, well, I suppose my uncle, my cousin's dad, you know, he's not my blood relative, whatever, I don't know how you explain it. He came to visit from Dubai, the Emirates, recently. And we were having a discussion, me, him, and my other uncle and stuff, and we were just talking. And then he went on to the subject of Arab poetry. And bro, he started reciting pre-Islamic poetry from the times of Jahiliyyah. But it just showed you how far back his knowledge went. Just out of the blue, he just started doing this. And then I mentioned it to my cousin, his son, when I saw him a few months later. And he was like, oh, I didn't even know my dad knew that stuff. You know? And I was like, bro, like, your dad knows some things, man. Do you know what I mean? Like, he was reciting poem after poem, and he was giving me like a tafsir almost of each poem and what it meant and stuff. So it just shows like their culture. Like, I would have to go out of my way to really deeply try and find that knowledge of that particular topic in Arab history, right? Because they grew up with that as their culture. That's equivalent to me reciting Shakespeare, because I know what Shakespeare is around here because I was taught that, you know. So I think that's a perspective we have to have. We come at it from a very alien and foreign perspective because we're not of that. Well, at least I don't know about you, but a lot of Muslims, at least in the UK, who adopted practicing Islam, they don't necessarily know about Arab culture and history unless they go and embark on it because they haven't grown up around it. So there's a bias there. There's a bias that then you think that everyone else in the Muslim world is like you, who, you know, without that knowledge.
I suppose I've had the similar experience with my dad where it's like when I started, I don't even want to say seeking knowledge, but just being more exposed to, I guess the academic side or just, you know what I mean, of Islam. Sometimes you start talking to my dad, we get into a topic, whatever topic. My dad has been through all of that, man. Even though he came from a, you know, uneducated family at the time, like when he was a kid. But he lived in Saudi. When he was in Saudi, he was like learning loads of stuff. And he was quoting, the fatwas from, you know, 20 years ago and this and that, because he was there at that time and all that. And so, you know, to be honest, my dad's ahead of me in everything. Yeah.
It's interesting though, because it makes you think, now that you are a father and now that you hold that position, like your kids, I know your son's a bit young. Well, they're growing, I suppose. But they're going to start looking at you as if you are a particular way. And maybe they'll look at you the same way you look at your father. Maybe my son will look at me one day the same way that I looked at my father, in a potentially negative light. And how would that make me feel? You know, and what perspective does that put me in? Because he turned 5, subhanAllah, a couple of days ago. And that's like, whoa, in a blink of an eye, he's 5. In another blink of an eye, he's 10. At 10 years old, he can have a coherent conversation with me about anything. He probably thinks he's better than me in some things, you know? So it's like, wow, I need to be conscious of that. I need to teach him. How do you teach him, though? Because we live in a society that promotes the superiority of kids against their parents in many ways, you know? Yeah. Oh, yeah, dad's a bit of a technophobe. Oh, yeah, he doesn't get it. Oh, I'll teach him. Oh, what? That kind of language, that kind of... There's no default of like, oh, my parent is... And this is a whole other topic in itself, and we can go on forever about that. But, you know, that plays a part, and that extends not just to parents, but elders in general, you know, and the pioneers are the younger generation, and they know better, and they're going to change the world, and the old ones are stuck in their ways, and it is what it is.
You know, sometimes, I said this before, like, the culture might inform what type of deeds you prioritize.
Yeah.
So, like, a lot of Arabs of our parents' generation, they all shave.
Right.
And that's because they come from a time where it's like shaving, long beards are actually associated with like kind of terrorists or whatever, right? Like more than now. Let's just say it like that.
Yeah.
More than now. So that they might like shave, okay. But like when it comes to like the rights of the neighbors or visiting the sick, that's where I might slack, right? Or like our generation might find that harder,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
So really, it's just I would say swings and roundabouts, really. Like,
Yeah. Absolutely, 100%. The visual stuff for our generation, the outward stuff, is so easy. The beard, the maybe even the hijab. I don't want to speak for sisters, but maybe it is. Maybe for sisters, that putting on the hijab can be quite easy for them or whatever. I don't know. Maybe that's a bad statement to make. But at least for a male perspective, the beard is very easy to do and this and that. Bro, all the other stuff that actually all the elders do all the time, whether it's like how they treat the guest, like you said, whether it's charity, whether it's dua, like we mentioned in a previous episode, whether it's tawakkul in Allah, whether it's going and dealing through hardship. SubhanAllah, just watching Qalbi Itma'in, that show, just showed me how people deal with hardship. People reluctant to share their stories. People would talk about their struggles with a smile on their face, and the people would have nothing, absolutely nothing, and they'd go and give the host something on TV, not knowing they're being recorded. And I was like, wow, like that really changed my perspective on the Muslim Ummah, because it was giving me highlights from all over the Muslim Ummah, all over the world, and I was like, look, there's so much good. And he would say it. He would say like "Mazal al-khair" or whatever he says. There's still good in the world, and Nas and Nas. That was his catchphrase. So yeah, bro, really inspiring stuff, and it's really good to have that positive. Like my mum's in Tunisia at the moment, and we're still doing the paperwork run and the bureaucracy and all that stuff. And I spoke to her yesterday. I think it was yesterday. She said to me on the phone. She said, "You know what?" She was like, "Oh, this country," and then she stopped herself. She goes, "You know what? Actually, although it's like it is a bit swings and roundabouts, you've got to go get this paper, and get that paper." She said, everyone I've spoken to has apologized for the way things are. However, they've really helped me out. Despite the fact that this is how it has to be done, they're like, listen, this is just the way it has to be done. We don't want to mess you about. They've been really supportive in giving her the information, telling her what to do, telling her what to bring, telling her how to do it. And they've been really polite about it and helpful. And she goes, "Oh, I felt so bad that I lost my temper a little bit with a particular person who was just trying to do her job. But if I could see her again, I'd really like to thank her because she really helped me, etc., etc." And that was really reassuring, because me coming at it from my old negative way, I would have been like, "Oh, this country and this people, the way things are done here and the people that do it, as if it was their fault." But it's not. It's just the way things are. SubhanAllah. So, yeah.
Yeah, and those, I mean, that's a mindset, right? Like looking for the good and stuff. And I guess sometimes comes from gratitude. Like, okay, I'm fed up. There's a lot of negative stuff I'm going through. I'm frustrated. But if you have that habit of, being thankful, then eventually you're not just going to say, thank Allah for this, thank Allah, but you're going to realize, oh, there are actually people that Allah is helping me through, right? And they need to be thanked as well, kind of thing. So yeah, and about what was I gonna say? I pulled up. This is kind of going backwards a little bit, but I was giving you the example of the sensationalism from the blogs. There's another example, right? And maybe this just because I've seen this recently. That's why I wanted to bring it up as an example. So remember Mahdi, where he's kind of got the more red pill kind of content on YouTube. Mahdi.
Oh yeah. I remember now. Yeah.
Yeah. I think on the red pill episode we briefly mentioned him. So check out this title: as technology advances, 97% of women will be with 3% of men.
What? 90% of women.
97% of women will be with just 3% of men, right?
What do you mean will be with? What does that mean?
I guess
like in a relationship?
Yeah, I guess that's what I mean. He's using kind of careful language, but basically what he means is that 97% of women will be attracted to just 3% of the men.
Oh, attracted.
They won't want to be with the other 97%. Because blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he explains in the video why he thinks that. The point is, again, sensationalist and negative, right? And the worst thing is that this is about in the future, because it's saying as technology advances. So it's not even that you can say that right now certain big negative thing is happening. It's more like projecting forward how bad something is going to be, right? Something's going to be really bad in the future. It's not even real now. So that's another example. And yeah, some of these kind of red pill guys, they do this a lot. They have a habit of doing that.
Well, you know, not to get too deep into red pill, but like one who swallows that red pill attracts a certain type of woman, and I don't want to be friends with the red pill, and I don't want to attract that particular type of woman. So then it's good to go. Like for the good get the good and the bad get the bad, so to speak. Like, bro, any woman that would be attracted to that kind of person, I wouldn't want them anyway.
You're right.
So it's like, well,
it's
there you
like,
go.
yeah,
You guys are good for each other.
These guys criticize women for the high standards they have, right, for the men. But the standards they're talking about is like money and this and that, right? But the like actually like religious women aren't even really looking for that per se.
And then imagine you suddenly then have a daughter, right? And then you want to protect your daughter, but your wife is of a particular type that is so I don't even know whatever molded into the particular perfect vessel for a red pillar, that then your daughter that's the only thing she's going to learn. But you don't want your daughter to learn that because you love your daughter more than you love your wife in that sense, you know. So yeah, it's confusing and it's complicated and it's just needs balance. And let's just go back to the Dean.
Yeah. The point is the sensationalism again, right?
It's clickbait culture, bro.
Yeah, it is. It is. But at least have a. Here's another one: Generation Spinster. What to do with women, Muslim women 35 plus, right?
What to do with them?
Yeah.
Or they like cargo.
Makes them
like
sound like a big burden, Yani.
Oh, it's like we're manufacturing something and we've got leftovers, bro. That's what it sounds like.
With, yeah.
What to do with your leftover crust on your toast? That's what that sounds like, bro. You've made a sandwich. What do you do with the leftover bits of bread?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess they should have said maybe what should we do about... Anyway. The point is, the sensationalist part here is generation spinster. Generation. I mean, you know, that's like, what is a generation? Is it what they, when you say generation spinster, if you think about it, like, and you go into the detail, you would imagine like that probably, once you get to 50% of a generation, yeah, we could say like the whole generation, we generalize. But like, I'm guessing they're talking about like Muslim women who are 35 or over, they're not married, they're not been able to marry or whatever. Like, is that even close to 50%? I don't think so at all. No doubt there is a real phenomenon of this, but let's not, blow it bigger than it is. And we don't know how many it is. Like if I pull a number out, it might be 10%, but then again, it might be 20%, but it's not enough to say it's a whole generation.
Yeah. I mean, it's the content that will attract a disgruntled individual who may have got married and had a really bad time, or may have never been married and really struggling to. So he lets out his frustrations through this movement. That's what I see as, because, alhamdulillah, I didn't have much issue getting married. Alhamdulillah, I don't have any issues like that in my marriage that would make me resentful. So therefore, none of this stuff appeals to me. I don't need to be angry at a particular type of women because the woman that I'm married to doesn't have those traits. So it doesn't bother me. It doesn't infuriate me. It doesn't make me rage, And but I do see the trap that one could fall into. Oh, I've tried. I've asked like 50 people for for their Wali's number, and they've all turned me down. Oh, all women are this and this and this. Oh, look, this movement talks about this. Let me follow that. Let me subscribe. Yeah. Easy to do that.
Yeah. And I wanted to go into this question a little bit because we've talked about it on the podcast, and I don't feel like it's actually, I've got to give credit to Shahid from the Middle Nation, who kind of opened my eyes to this questioning of the concept of feminism has, had a big influence on Muslim women, right? So if you go through his videos, because previously he kind of made videos countering this kind of red pill content. And one thing that he said that stuck out to me was he was just talking about, because these guys always talk about Muslim women, right? And when they say they're talking about Muslim women, they're talking about Muslim women in the West, right? So he came along and straight away he's talking about Muslim women in the whole world.
Right,
And that's very different, isn't it? It's completely
Yeah.
different culture and stuff. So he's like what you guys are saying about Muslim women, the whole Muslim women, like no way, because Muslim women, like if we take Indonesia, which is the most populated the Muslim country in the world, the women are nothing like what you're talking about, right? So don't say Muslim women. That's the first thing. The second thing, even if we are talking about Muslim women in the West and we're using the word feminism, well, let's define feminism, because that was something I was probably, what's the word? Guilty of. Is using feminism as like it's like a throwaway word, and it's not very clear what it means exactly. Sometimes it means stuff that us men don't like women doing or having or thinking. And sometimes it's the actual definition of feminism according to the originators of that movement. And like Muhammad Hijab, I was going through one of because he did a whole series, mashallah, called Londoniya, which is like going through this poem called Londoniya, about all the different isms, right, of the modern times, like the last couple hundred years or whatever. And so it's like 34 episodes. Each episode is like an hour, and each one goes through an ideology of like the 20th century, right? So there's one about feminism, there's one about communism, socialism, nationalism, all these ideas, right? And like going through the history of it and what it actually means, what the idea behind it is, and then I guess its relationship to Islam. So Muhammad Hijab did a great job. He was talking about feminism, the origins of it. And if we take feminism from a definition of what they meant, right? Like, for example, these second wave feminists, the leaders of the thing that actually wrote the books and put the philosophy down of what actually do we believe. If we take that as the definition, yani, for example, one thing that they believe is, they said, I can't remember her name, but one of the leaders of the movement, she said the home, like staying at home, being a housewife kind of thing, it is she called it like concentration camp.
Right, yeah.
Yes. So take this phrase, for example, share it with a random Muslim woman in the West. What would her reaction be to that? What do you think, bro? Like, you live in England, right? So even actually a non-Muslim woman in the UK.
It depends, doesn't it? I mean, it depends what context you're talking about it in. If you're talking about it as in like the home where the man puts the woman, like as in she's in the home.
No, but that's adding story to it, isn't it?
Yeah, but if you just say the home is like a concentration camp, I don't think you'd have to have context to it. If you knew that feminists had said that, then you know where the context is coming from. If I said to a work colleague, oh yeah, the home is like a concentration camp, they'd be like, what are we talking about? I love my house, But if you said, this feminist lady said the home is like a concentration camp, oh yeah, what she means by that is like a woman being made to be at home, or a woman being a housewife is like she's in a concentration camp.
Yeah, I mean, in the context of being a housewife, like,
yeah, in the context of being
I don't even think 50% of non-Muslim women in the UK would even have an issue with being housewives.
It's all about context. It's all about how that discussion is said.
Okay, but I'm just like, putting the discussion aside, you go to a non-Muslim woman in the UK and you say, look, your husband's gonna get a 20k raise, right? So you're gonna be comfortable. Do you want to stay at home? Just this and that.
Yeah, true. Why do they stay at home why do they have maternity leave? Why is that a thing? It's so you can spend time with your kid. Because because why is there an arbitrary cut-off period for maternity leave? Oh, right, your son's old enough now, your kid's old enough, go back to work. Who made that rule up? Maybe my son isn't old enough now. Maybe I want to carry on looking after him.
Yeah.
Clearly, industry, government, companies, organizations have realized that there's a value in women, not even a value, that women value spending time with their kids at that particular age.
Obviously, it kills them when they go back to work.
Yeah. Otherwise, we'd have whole institutions that looked after babies. That's what would normally. Oh, you've given birth. There you go. Carry on the work. No, clearly, clearly
The motherhood or mothers are given that value. Yeah.
mothers value it, because I don't think corporations value it. Corporations rather get back at work, but
Yeah.
mothers value it so much. But corporations have cut it off at a particular point,
Yeah.
because they only get a particular
Well,
amount of time.
ultimately, it's the government really who's enforced that. Yeah.
This is it.
But the point is, bro, like you would get a certain percentage that are like, look, even if I'm making good money, my husband's making good money, and we're living comfortably, and I can stay with my kids at home, or maybe I don't have kids or whatever, I still want to go to work because I just want to do that. I want to, whatever. They've been taught to, aim high and blah, 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 right? But I still think, bro, like I'm talking about non-Muslim women. I don't know what, but like 40, 50, whatever percent would choose to stay at home.
Yeah.
And if that's true for the non-Muslim women, what about the Muslim women?
Yeah. And I just feel bad for the women that don't realise that they're in that trap. I've had a colleague, like my boss at work once, like, I can't remember what, she basically said, like, she was doing everything I was doing, and then she's, on top of that, was like, oh, and I had to get the kids ready, and I had to take them to school, and I had to do this, and I had to do all these stuff that are associated with a mother, no doubt. Yeah. And I was just like, in my head, I was like, why are you doing this to yourself? Like, I know your husband, he's on a really good wage. Like, why are you here? I've spoken to Muslim men, bro, who have shared their, I don't want to say displeasure, but their concern for their wife who is addicted to their job or addicted to a career. And they've said to me, the men have said to me, I earn enough for both of us. She doesn't need to work. Yeah. But she's so attached to this idea of a career that she's stuck to it. And I was just like, yeah, I can't imagine that.
I mean, that's mostly propaganda, the reason that they're into the career so much. But,
yeah, maybe.
The point is, if we take the real definition from the originators of the movement and we compare that with the opinions of Muslim women, a lot of them would not agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
For example, again, one of the fundamental principles is equality between men and women in pretty much in everything, right? Yeah, of course, they have to have some exceptions. Even the mighty leaders of the feminist movement must make exceptions because of biology, right? But mostly they're like, look, men and women should absolutely be treated the same. So now you go to a Muslim woman and you say that, and then probably a lot of them, they know the hadith about a woman must obey her husband, for example. What do you think they're going to choose? I think that they might have some difficulty in arranging that in their mind, but ultimately they're probably gonna say, yeah, men and women can't be treated the same.
Well, that's what you said earlier. It's like take that across the world, across the majority of Muslim women around the world, then you won't have a problem. It's like, bro, it's like when I was in Tunisia. It's like, oh, my gran and my auntie would come up to me and go, oh, thank God you're here. You're doing what the man's job is. Like they said that to me, bro. I would go out, like do all that sort of business stuff, come home, and they wouldn't let me do anything else. They wouldn't let me because they considered that I went and did my job. Whilst I know if I was in England, that dialogue and discourse doesn't necessarily exist here. I felt the difference basically around them in that culture. Even though I thought, and I'd come home and I'd be like, oh, they're fixing something, let me go help them. What are you doing? Go sit down. But in my English Western culture, I shouldn't stop either. I should carry on when I'm back home. So yes, there is those cultures exist, and my my gran is illiterate, bro. She didn't pick that up and read it somewhere. That's just something that is in her culture. That's ingrained in her.
Yeah. But what about in the UK? Like what I just said, basically, what would be the answer or the outcome from what you've experienced?
I mean, among my wife, I don't want to talk about my wife's perspectives, but my wife's a lot more traditionalist than maybe some of her friends are. She shared some of the discourse that her friends have said. Like, I don't know if I want to put anyone on blast, but like this discussion of us moving to Tunisia, for example, right? In my head, it's like, well, this is something I've got to do. I might have to do this. My wife understands that because that's the tradition, is that you follow the husband. But apparently when she raised that issue with some of her friends once, they're like, we talk about, you don't need to do what he says. You don't need to go there. If you don't want to go, don't go. Like,
are they married though?
Yeah. A lot of them are. And it's like, but where I come from, we make that decision because the man has to, I grew up in a family where my mum followed my dad wherever he went. My dad's from Tunisia. My mum's from Morocco. Why is my mum in Tunisia right now? Because she followed him. That's basically the fact of the matter.
Well, obviously, like any man moving to another country, a large reason, like a large part of his thinking is going to be, is it going to be suitable for my family anyway, right?
But it's like, what do you value more, your family makeup or your own choices? What happened to family units and family cohesion and stuff? It's like, you don't want to be in that part of the world, or you don't want to go to that town, or you don't want to live in that city. Well, go, you choose what you want. Choices first. But the cohesion of the family is what should be important.
So maybe in those girls' families or whatever, they have a weird culture, a different culture.
Maybe,
if you put it to them, the concept of obeying your husband, I mean, they can't deny it. They would just probably say, something like, well, if the men were this way, then okay, we'll do it.
Yeah, if the men were like this, if you're not the Prophet and you're not the Sahaba, if you were like
but
that,
they would not deny the obedience concept, except the extreme ones in America, maybe.
I don't know.
But that's literally kufr, yani, come on.
No, I wouldn't even go there. I wouldn't even make that statement. Like, bro, I've heard some things, man, and that's shaped my understanding.
Yeah, that's social media, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Going back to what we were saying,
yeah.
Like, I still have negative assumptions, bro.
You see these girls that you just described, though, you didn't describe them, some of their feelings.
Yeah.
I used to think 90% of girls were like that.
Yeah.
I don't anymore. I think that's just
when you
social
say 90%
media
of
shaped.
Girls,
yeah.
Do you say 90% of girls all over the world?
No, Muslim girls in the West.
Okay. Yeah, I still do think that a lot of them are like that, if not more of them are. I really do. And I don't want to. And I sometimes do accept and consume the pushback where it's like, well, a lot of men are trash or whatever. Like, I don't want to, but like, I don't blame them when I see some things that guys do, And that also informs women. What they see from men informs women, because they then think, oh, all men are like this and this and this.
Yeah,
right.
But even that is coming from social media and sensationalism.
Absolutely.
So, for example, this is a good example that I was talking to my wife about this. One girl gets beaten by her husband, and she's in the West, let's say, and she gets a divorce, and then she writes a whole thread on Twitter about it, right?
Oh boy.
You know the typical thing. She writes a whole thread about it. Now, and then she's like, yeah, and I didn't go to uni even because I got married young, and then I was just at home, and then he was working. But then when he divorced me, he kicked me out, and I had nothing, right? And my parents were in like whatever other country, and I was like homeless, whatever the story, right?
Right.
Now, obviously, this is a sad reality, definitely sometimes. But the point is that when you read something so negative and so sometimes, let's be real, like sensationalized. Yeah. Now it's like maybe you see 2-3 of these stories and you start thinking that could happen to me. Let me build my CV so it doesn't happen to me, right?
Yeah,
and just from 2, 3, 4, 5 occurrences of this, you start to actually maybe make life choices based on it.
Yeah, I could read 100 of those stories. I could have 100. Maybe I've read 100 of those exact stories, and that will shape my understanding of all the men ever. Right?
Forget 100, bro. 5.
No. Yeah, I know 5, but I'm just saying as an extreme.
Yeah.
Not even an extreme. I'm sure I have actually read 100 in my lifetime of those stories.
Yeah.
Right? But then there's against that 100, which has informed your whole opinion.
Yeah. There are millions of Muslim men.
There is millions of good stories that don't get shared because good doesn't sell.
Yeah. And good's not shared, right?
Yeah. And
women don't want to share their husbands, so they don't share the good stuff about
one or two people might share a good story one day, and all the women will be like, "Oh my god, how did you find him? He's such a gem."
And then they give her hasad and ayn.
Hey, there's good and bad in everyone now, man, and you just got to have that tawakkul, and at the end of the day, we're all dished out.
But this is powerful, bro. This is a real example of how people can start thinking, oh, maybe I should build up my career, my this and that in case.
Bro. I'll tell you one example. We'll end it on here, yeah? And I don't care. I'm going to share this because I have to go. But
this is a bit of a like
you'll see the the whole discourse of like, it was a popular discourse that women could do no harm when it came to domestic abuse and stuff, and always believe the woman, blah 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 blah.
Okay.
And it's, and then like this new case, I don't know if you've been seeing the highlights and stuff of it, like the Amber Heard Johnny Depp's thing just hit the mainstream, and now everyone's like, oh.
What's the lowdown of this?
Okay, the long story short is like, I think like there was allegations that Johnny Depp would abuse his wife, who's also an actress and stuff.
Okay.
They're very famous, and they're both obviously very famous. I think Johnny Depp's way more famous and probably earns way more than she does. But anyway, I think the court settled, and now this is like a defamation trial. So it's not.
Yeah, I heard that he lost a case in the UK.
Yeah, so I think he lost the case, but then this is like the defamation thing, which is.
So he's suing her for.
He's basically suing her
for ruining his reputation. Yeah.
But the defamation case is all publicized all over YouTube, right?
Yeah.
And like
crazy.
People reacting to it and all sorts, and you can watch the whole thing. And like people have put highlights of like.
It's like what's it called? What's that show where all these celebrities go on this? Big Brother. It's like
stuff like that. Yeah. But it's a court case, and like they've got an entire. They've got. Like, for example, he'll have all the evidence backing everything he said and all this stuff, and then she will have like zero evidence whatsoever, and it's all hearsay, and it's all this, and it's all that, and blah blah blah.
Okay.
And then basically, judge being the jury, as we are, if we watch those things, we're like, well, yeah, this is obvious. She abused him. It wasn't that he was abusing her; she clearly abused him.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's basically the conclusion everyone's drawing. It's like, oh, yeah, his finger got chopped off because she threw a glass bottle at him.
Wow.
Like, he's got bruises on his face because she beat him up. She would make a claim about, I used to, like, one of the famous ones I caught was like, she made a claim that she used to put this particular makeup on to hide bruises, right, that it caused on her, and she even showed her lawyer showed the makeup on the courtroom, and then that company that made the makeup came out and said, hey, we didn't even manufacture that makeup brand when you said this happened.
Wow.
Like, all the evidence just falling apart in front of the people, right? So.
Wow.
So what it did is it showed that this stuff does exist, and women can make mistakes or be the aggressors or whatever in this world. I'm not advising you guys to get hooked up on that, but highlights make their way onto Twitter feeds and stuff, and you can't help but get curious and click on them.
Crazy. So it looks like he's going to win that one.
I don't know what it's. I feel like every day I'm seeing new clips from it, so it's like it must still be ongoing. I don't really know how it works in America, but I suppose at least by public opinion he's winning. I've seen trending hashtags telling Disney to give him his job back, and because I think he lost his job in Pirates of the Caribbean and all this stuff. I don't know. So the assumption is to just go with what's the norm. Which is, he abused her.
That definitely does seem like a real part of feminism that is influencing at least certain countries, which is the law.
Yeah.
The laws do seem to favor women in certain ways, definitely. And even, bro, like, even if you think about a long time ago, if the judge is a man, and then the woman is saying one thing, and a man saying, like, he might be inclined to just, side with the woman, right? Like, like he'd see her like she's the weaker one, if you like, and so I need to like help her out, unless it's obvious, Yani. Yeah. But so just to finish off, because I thought it was gonna be clear, like, about this whole feminism thing, but you actually still feel that way, that no, it actually has really influenced like most Muslim women in the West, at least.
I think it's not because they actively are disregarding that. I think it's because maybe that tradition has become so alien in predominant Western culture that it's hard to go against that grain. Okay,
but putting the culture part aside, right? If we just talk about things that are like actual principles in our religion.
Well, I think what the first question would be, show me where it says that. That's what the question. That about obedience, okay? It'll be like, show me where it says that.
Okay.
Because what most women might share is like, oh, Khadija was a businesswoman and her husband was the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So on an economic level, it's like Khadija radiallahu anha was the independent, strong. Like, they'll draw a correlation between that.
Obviously, yeah.
But Khadija radiallahu anha may not have been what in your mind is a strong independent businesswoman.
Yeah.
You know, but you've applied what modern day strong independent
Yeah.
businesswomen are and thrown that onto Khadija radiallahu anha.
Okay.
So
you're saying they might be ignorant of the obedience element?
yeah, I think they might be ignorant of the obedience, and I think
because not enough shuyukh talk about it, bro, because of feminism.
Well, this is it. I mean, I was ignorant to it. I was ignorant to the black and white of it. Do you understand? I was ignorant to the black and white of it. I thought this was just something cultural that we had, and I wouldn't have necessarily called it obedience. I would have said leadership. I would have said the leadership of a man. But to call it obedience was completely out of my... Because nobody ever said that word when I started practicing. No sheikh ever said it or said it so clear cut, right? Not until recently that I started seeing that word. It wasn't until actually after I got married that I started seeing that open up a bit more. Probably because the red pill movement came up, and then Muslims realize that there's not an appetite, but there's people that need a bit more guidance on how to navigate that space, navigate masculinity, manhood, leading a family, etc. That I started seeing it pop up. But when I saw it pop up, the backlash I saw from that was humongous, and this is just in my sphere of observation. It's not necessarily the entire thing. So
that's crazy. Okay, but it makes sense, bro, because this is something I can't remember where I've heard this before, but basically, all these Islamic institutes, okay, they get money from people paying for their courses or whatever, and from donations. It turns out a large percentage of those people are women.
Right.
So now you've got like the leading face of this institute. If he's going out doing speeches about obedience to the husband and these things, financially it might not look as good for them, And so apparently that's is a phenomenon that has started to change the discourse of even these, these speakers of whatever sort, Yeah. So,
Find out next time on Mind Heist, whatever episode we'll be on next time.
Yeah.
I
mean, let's share notes, right? So the things that we've been saying, I think it's this way, I think it's this way. We've admitted that it's based largely on our personal experiences or what we've seen on social media. So you guys, listeners, Yani, share with us in the comments or wherever what your experiences are of these topics, and we'll see, Yani, if we have different, experiences.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Go to mindheistpodcast.com if you want to shoot us an email, if you want to find all the links, basically. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.